And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. So today, I'm really excited. My guest is Michael Bungay Stanier, and I'm going to read you a little bit of his bio because it is rare that I get a bio that makes me chuckle. So I wanted to share this one with you. My name is Michael. I can hop. Do you want to see me hop? That's how I introduced myself to bemused strangers at the supermarket when I was 3. Not much has changed, although my mom is a little less embarrassed. So here's the rest of the bio. So Michael is at the forefront of shaping how organizations around the world make being coach-like an essential leadership competency. His book, The Coaching Habit, is the best-selling coaching book of this century, with over 700,000 copies sold, a zillion positive reviews on Amazon. He has been named the Canadian Coach of the Year. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He's the founder of a company called Box of Crayons. He's a member of the MG 50. He's got new books coming out. He's one of the best keynoters out there. And more importantly, he's just an all-around good guy. So welcome aboard today, Michael.
That I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for saying I'm an all-around good guy as well. That probably means the most out of all of those things.
Excellent. And given that this is audio only, if you'd like to hop, feel free.
I am hopping.
Excellent.
You can't see that. You can't hear that. I'm literally here hopping on one foot even as we speak.
So it's sort of like if a tree falls in the woods, how will we know? Cool. So you've been at this game of content and thought leadership and speaking and authorship for a while. How long has it been?
I started Box of Crayons almost 20 years ago, and I was producing newsletters and writing and bits and pieces right from the start. I mean, one of the very first things I ever did was a little video called The 8 Irresistible Principles of Fun, which took off and went viral before kind of viral videos were a thing. And I massively failed to capitalize on any of that.
Well, congratulations.
It got seen by millions of people, and I captured exactly 0 people's emails or inboxes or upsells or anything like that. But I've certainly been in the place of content creation for quite a while now.
Excellent. So I want to start actually with a little bit of the end in mind. So when you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, you're now in a place where a Box of Crayons, the typical model is the author, the speaker is also the CEO and in charge of everything. Very, very, very few. You look at Blanchard, certainly Covey, maybe Chester Elton, actually get to the point where they're able to turn their content businesses into real companies and not have to be the CEO taking care of the things they don't want to speak of. So talk about the end, and then I want to go backwards how you got there, where you're at. That's a great place to be. How scared are you? How did you tell me a bit about
that? In 6 months ago, I stepped away from being CEO, and a month ago, I was kind of finally completely effectively walked off the premises by Shannon, the new CEO, who was like, Michael. I was doing a kind of a secondary role, not a secondary role, but a reporting to her role around some program design stuff. And she's like, we got to stop this. This isn't really working. I'm like, you're right.
So she fired you basically from that functional role.
I'm going to pretend that I resigned, but she pretty much fired me. And it is fantastic. I mean, honestly, and it's discombobulating as well, because, for 20 years, I've had this identity of the guy who's Box of Crayons. I mean, because my surname Bungay Stanier is a bit of a mouthful, lots of people call me Michael Crayons or Michael Box of Crayons or Michael BOC. So I'm taking off a suit I have worn pretty tightly for close to 2 decades. And so there's one part of me that is vaguely traumatized by this, because I'm like, well, who am I now? What am I doing? How am I showing up in the world? What do I stand for if I don't stand for Box of Crayons? And there's another part of me, the bigger part of me is going, well, first of all, Shannon in 6 months has been a better CEO than I've been in 20 years. I mean, she is just rocking it. It's amazing.
So let's talk about that. So here's what I've noticed in my many years of being in this space, helping lots of folks, is early on, folks take on that role because it's, hey, there's no one else here. I guess I got to do this, right? Mm-hmm. And then you sort of break down, if you had to write a job description or whatever, most of the things that a real CEO does are not the things that a great content creator, thought leader, speaker wants to be doing. They need to be done. Somebody needs to make sure cash flow is healthy. Someone needs to make sure margins are good. Maybe some of the stuff around setting the vision and the direction and all that stuff. But tell me about the things that you've been able to shed that Shannon Shirley apparently does better than you. But what you've been able to do with that time that you've been able to release to someone else.
Well, so first of all, absolutely right. I mean, what's the difference between Shannon coming in going, my job is to run this company as a successful business, versus my approach, which is my job is to marvel at the fact that somehow I built a business and it's miraculous in that alone. And
right.
And it is a Michael-centric business. Even though I very early on made the decision not to make myself the kind of the name of the business, and less so the face of the business, trying to make it scalable.
Yep.
I was still, very much the business just naturally organized itself around me because I'm a big personality. And when you're the founder, you don't really realize it, but your word goes. And Shannon's like going, no, okay, I'm coming in and we're pivoting the business model. We're bringing a finance person who understands margins and actually gets us smart about money. We're actually needing to shift the whole culture of the company so that we serve our different type of client in a different way. It's a complete remake. And part of what's brilliant about this is I just wouldn't have had the fortitude or the perseverance to go through with that. So I recognize my lack of abilities, which is I'm just not that interested in the practicalities and the actualities of scaling. I'm ambitious for the impact I want my work to have, but you have to get out of your way to find people who can say, let me show you how to scale your work.
Yep.
Which keeps you in your genius zone. And for me, that's like, I'm good at content creating. I'm good at having ideas. I'm good at being that translator that moves people from complexity through to simplicity on the other side. All of that is my sweet spot. The other stuff I can drag my way through, but if I was still running the company, we would stick at kind of the revenue mark we are now and, grow a little bit. Shannon's going to take us to $10 million and $20 million in revenue in 3 to 5 years. She's just got a plan.
Excellent. So I want to touch on two key things or big things that I picked up on what you said. One is, and I'll call it the curse of the creative, but it's also the blessing of the creative, right? So you said, you're really good at building the content, delivering the content, and getting the content out there.
Yeah.
So that's a blessing because it's fun, and that's not a role that you can put up a job listing on Indeed for and say, need someone that can write great books and be an awesome speaker. Like that's not going to happen, right? Versus someone that can do cash flow analysis or product development or operations or whatever. So that's the creative piece.
Yeah.
To say, listen, that is me. The other piece that you touched on, which I think is a little more complicated and a little bit more of what people struggle, is if you look at it from linearly, the model is typically, hey, look at me, I'm a rock star. I do a bunch of cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
I write books, I speak or whatever. And then you get big enough to go, don't look at me, look at my content, right?
Right.
And I think that the whiplash that happens to the end user is, wait a minute, I bought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which is Michael delivers the content. I take a bite of it and there's an experience of that. Now there's Michael. That's one way to get it. It's a premium product. It's expensive. He goes to keynotes, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a whole other suite of products, offerings, or solutions where I always say my job is to make my clients irrelevant. So tell me, sort of, how do you have to have the stronger content and make you less? I don't want to say make you irrelevant, but make you somewhat irrelevant.
Yeah. No. It's a really great way to put it. I mean, somebody should start a company called Thought Leadership Leverage, because this is the heart of the work, right? Which is to go, you get to, I think it's an ego thing.
Yeah.
Which is, it is really nice to feel like you have the spotlight and be the star and have the people calling up going, no, Michael, I want you because you're amazing. And believe me, my fragile male ego gets flattered by that.
Yeah, of course.
And I have bigger ambitions for the impact I want to have in this world, which is like, I want to touch, the language I use is I want to infect 1 billion people with the possibility virus. So part of why that statement of a mission works for me is it speaks to a lot of people, 1 billion people, but the idea of a possibility virus means that it finds a way of spreading without, like, for me to touch 1 billion people, that it means that 999,500,000 are never going to know who I am. They're never going to know my name. They're not going to know where the idea comes from. But I've created content and means and ways of getting stuff out into the world that makes the world a better place. So I'm happy to sacrifice the short-term ego of being the star of the moment, with the bigger picture going, look, how do I just get stuff out there? I mean, you and I, just before we hit record, we're talking about Marshall Goldsmith. So Marshall is a man who likes fame. He likes to be famous. Yep. He says he'll say that really explicitly. He's worked really hard to be the best known leadership person and coach.
Well, and he'll joke and say, who's number 2 or 3? And everybody goes, I don't know. And he goes, that's the point.
Exactly. Right? And he's like, he made a decision 35, 40 years ago to go, I'm going to be famous. And he has ticked that box. But, with this Marshall Goldsmith 100, he's setting up a way of going, here's how my impact ripples beyond my name. Because Marshall works with me, I work with somebody works with somebody else, and there's a transmission of knowledge and impact that goes beyond the name and the personality and the spotlight. And that's the bigger game. And the call for action, I think, is if you're a thought leader, you go, what matters more? Somebody loving you or your ideas changing the world? And I hope for most people listening to this podcast, it's the second of that. And then you go, so what will I say no to so I can say yes to having the impact I really want?
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. So one of the ways I sort of frame what you just described is, I believe, and it's just the world according to me, probably not right, but it's what I've seen based on my experience, is there 3 things that drive authors and thought leaders and content folks to do what they do. And it's not that one's better than the other. It's more of a pie chart, right? So one is money. There's some people, it's all about the money, right? That I'm going to do this because, I'm going to make $1 zillion out of it. Other people is, money's great and I'd like more than less, but, not really that important. Second is ego, where there's something enormously gratifying about seeing people being in front of a room and speaking, like going to work every day where your job is to get up for an hour and it ends in a standing ovation is not something, the postman ever experiences, right? Like that's sort of weird, right? You're somebody laying bricks at the end of the day is not and the day is a much longer day and they're not flying first class to Scottsdale or something, totally different experience. And then the last piece, which is I think where you were leaning towards, is evangelism. And I don't mean in the religious perspective, but like part of the reason I'm on this planet is to unleash these concepts, these thoughts, these ideas that either relieve suffering or just make the world a better place for certain people. And I think it's being honest with yourself as a thought leader to say, at this point in my career, here's what that pie chart looks like. Let me evaluate it again in a year or two. Maybe, money's hit a certain threshold. I can afford to be more evangelical. Like I would argue that Marshall is in more of an evangelical stage right now. And we talk about the money separately, but like he's in this give back stage and it's a legacy stage. And that's really beautiful. It's great.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you can see how he's gone his way through those 3 different phases. Like he's gone through fame and ego, he's gone through money, and he's not disassociated from any of that. They're still there, but he's gone. I'm shifting the balance now to make it more about legacy. And I'm I'm never going to be as famous as Marshall Goldsmith, but I've made enough money to be pretty happy, amazed actually. And I have a low cost life. Like I don't own a house, I don't have kids, I don't own a car. I've got my wife and I love small luxuries, so like a decent bottle of wine and some fancy glasses, and I like buying sneakers. But I don't need to earn that much money to kind of afford most of that. So I'm like, I've always been driven mostly by the legacy piece, and that's been a helpful framing, and that's helped me step away from being CEO at Box of Crayons.
Excellent. So I would be remiss if we didn't talk about publishing for a little bit, given that you've sold the first book, or The Coaching Habit is over 700,000. I know you have a new book coming out.
Yeah.
When did The Coaching Habit come out? Was that?
Almost 4 years ago. So it came out on the 29th of February, 2016, because I was like, it's a leap day. That's awesome. And so...
that's right. Oh, okay.
And I had a plan, which was, because, when I didn't know how successful it's going to be, and most books don't sell that many copies. So I was like, you know what? What's genius about this is in 4 years' time, I'll be able to go, it's the first birthday of The Coaching Habit.
Exactly.
How many copies have I sold? And the new book comes out also on the 29th of February, so on the 4-year anniversary.
That's funny. So that's actually, so you could write a book every year, but take 4 years to do it. That's brilliant.
There's a pattern here.
So for those out there, I would say most out there either have written a book, have thought of written a book, or have written multiple books, or are writing a book.
Yeah.
Give us your take on talk about the business side of this. One, choosing a publisher, getting the book out there. Just give us the world according to you. And the reason I'd listen to you is because A, the books are good, and B, they've sold.
Yeah. So I self-published The Coaching Habit, and I'm self-publishing the new book as well. Here's the thing about writing a book. It is a miserable, miserable experience. Even people who like writing books, it's a miserable experience. If you're not quite sure if you like writing books, it's going to be even more miserable because your first draft sucks. Your second draft is worse than your first draft. Your fourth draft gets it back to the mediocre level of your first draft. By the time you're in your eighth draft and the book's actually starting to look good, you're starting to hate yourself, hate the idea, hate the book. It is a really hard way to get thought leadership out into the world. There's lots of other channels to think about to create IP and get thought leadership out in the world. The book has this sort of slightly mythological status.
Yes.
And, Peter, you'd probably know this better than most, but most books just don't sell very many copies. So,
yeah, the stats on that are staggeringly depressing. I think the average business book over its lifespan now, not even initial release, is under 2,000. I mean, you could stand on the corner in Times Square and be that who's the guy that stands in his underwear with the guitar and reach that many people in about 20 minutes.
Yeah. So if you're writing a book, you've got to have a couple of reasons to do it. One is you're like, I just want to write a book and get my name on it, and I'm not attached to trying to sell hundreds of thousands of copies or even tens of thousands of copies, and that's a great reason to do it. Just to be like, here it is. Here's a legacy act where I'm like, I can give this to my friends for Christmas gifts for the next 10 years.
Sure.
The other piece is to go, and this is where I come from, which is I have a business model of which the book is part of an ecosystem. Because I was thinking to myself, even if I sell no copies of this book directly to a consumer, this book becomes the way that I open up conversations with Box of Crayons clients. And hopefully some of them find them, but at the very least, I'm like, let me send you my book. It's been blurbed by famous people. It's about coaching. You're looking to buy coaching, and I can build it into the programs that we sell. So there's a way that this book gets into other people's hands. And I was like, this book is an investment of somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 when you take into account the cost of self-publishing, of working with page 2, of publicity, of all of that sort of stuff. And I'm like, I can see a way that I will get that money back.
That's actually a hard dollar cost, let alone the opportunity cost of how much less work, less speaking, less revenue generating activities would you have done. It's probably some multiple of that 100 number.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And with this book, with the Coaching Habit, I can point to, I'm not sure if it's tens of millions of dollars, but it's north of $5 million in revenue that I can trace directly back to people picking up that book and going, I'm calling you, and that turning into a conversation.
Well, the point I wanted to go back to is you went through it quickly, and it was surprising. You self-published 700,000 self-published books. Like, whoa,
I know.
Like you can probably count on one hand, maybe part of a second, how many have achieved that. I want to understand what was your underlying decision in going a more non-traditional route, because I would argue if you chose to, particularly coming off the first book, you could have gone to Wiley, Random House, The Usual Suspects. What drove you to go the self-published route?
Well, The Coaching Habit was my 5th book.
Yep.
My 3rd book, I think, or 4th book was a book called Do More Great Work. It came out 10 years ago. And I originally self-published, but it got picked up by Workman, which is one of the New York publishers.
Yep.
And they kind of republished it. And over its lifetime, it's done pretty well. It's like about 100,000 copies sold.
Yep.
And I spent 3 years pitching them the idea for The Coaching Habit. And they kept going, it's not quite right yet. And I kept trying to reinvent the idea. And after 3 years, I finally went, this is exhausting, because they keep saying, we like you, sure, go away and have another go at it. And I was just running out of ability. And I was also just getting really closer to going, I'm seeing really the essence of what this book must be. So I sat down with them in 2015 and went, okay, we've got to stop this, this back and forth. Here's the idea. Here's the vision for the book. It's the pitch. It's a yes or a no. And I've got to that point where I don't mind which one it is. And they went, no. I was like, oh, I do mind. I was hoping you'd say yes. So I was like, I kind of walked away and licked my wounds because part of me is going, man, my last book with you sold 100,000 copies. I've got this ecosystem. I know what I'm doing. I can market a bit.
Why is this so hard?
If it was me, I'd be betting on the person, not on the book. But you know what? I said no. And so I then went, okay, so I can either get back into the publishing world, and I could have found another publisher, but it would take time. Or I could say, look, I'm going to self-publish, but if I'm going to self-publish, I'm going to do it as a professional.
Yes.
So the standard is this book cannot look like it's a self-published book. So I found a great editor. I called up Seth Godin. I went, Seth, who do you work with? And he introduced me to Catherine Oliver.
Yep.
I researched a designer and found an award-winning Canadian book designer because I'm up in Canada. He then introduced me to Page 2, which is the let's call him a white label publisher. They were like, we'll do all the work for you.
Right.
So you've got an ISBN number and you've got an Amazon listing and you've got distribution.
All the fun stuff.
all the miscellaneous details, which would have made me go, oh God, I don't care enough anymore. And they helped do all that work to get it out into the world. And then we had, so the book looks absolutely like a inverted commas, proper book and a self-published book. And then the other key thing, Peter, was that I said, I'm letting go of the delusion that I can make it onto any mailing, any kind of bestseller list. I'm committed to market this book for a year. I'm going to be on 3 to 5 podcasts every week for a year. And I'm just going to, I was inspired by a dinner I had with David Allen, the Getting Things Done guy, years ago. And he said, what's cool about Getting Things Done, it has sold more year on year every year since it's been
compounding
published.
Effect, yeah.
And I went, now that is a great measure of success. So I'm like, I'm going to spend a year trying to get the flywheel turning on this book. And most publishers or most authors go, I'm going to go all in on the launch, hope that I make a splash. And then they typically don't. And then their book vanishes and they kind of lie down and nap because they're exhausted.
Right. Or start another book.
And I'm like, play the longer game. You're like, you put all that work into getting a book going, play the longer game.
Yeah.
Go, because at the end of halfway through the first year, I'm like, actually my commitment to market this book is 3 years. I'm going to just keep talking about this book and talking about it. And you can guess I'm bored to death of some of the key messages of that book.
Right.
Because I've answered some questions a bazillion times. And it's all part of a commitment to say, I'm trying to infect 1 billion people with the possibility virus.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm doing what serves that.
Which is the mission piece of it.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So I believe you're probably a better human than I am. Because if it was me, I would be sending, to the lovely folks at Workman's my Nielsen reports on a monthly basis. Are you doing anything spiteful along those lines? Just out of curiosity.
You know what? I am grateful that they turned me down because that turned out to be far better. And I feel pretty smug about the decision that I made. It worked out pretty well for me. So I'm like, I can't claim to be that the thought hadn't crossed my mind to kind of call them up going, see, I told you. But I'm like, you know what?
See, that's the difference between a New Yorker and a Canadian there. So
look, they either already know about it, in which case they're already licking their wounds and they feel bad about it, or they don't know about it, in which case they don't care. So either way, what's the point?
Well, and I was going to say, when was the last time any business book sells 700,000 units, not a lot, let alone a self-published one. Because there still is, and I think it's a big mistake, this sort of New York publishing centric look down, self-published, oh, poo-poo, that means you're not good enough, whatever. And it's just not true. I think there's lots of reasons to choose how to publish. Some of it is financial. By the way, the margins on that, they probably also gave you millions of dollars inadvertently by allowing you to self-publish or pushing in that direction.
I'm earning
control, speed,
Yeah, I take away probably 4x per book sold than I do. Plus, I get to control the book. So I control the experience, I control the brand. Every time I republish it, I can tweak the call to actions in the book, so I can change that around as well. I have no worries about who owns IP or can I publish this or can I do something weird with the audio.
It's yours, right.
I love the freedom it gives me. I mean, it comes back to the thought leadership leverage again, which is like I actually have control over my own thought leadership in a way that going with a regular publisher would never give me.
Well, this has been fantastic. We could speak for hours, but we're gonna wrap it here. Give us a couple of, no pressure, but final words, final thoughts that might help one person out here get their book to beyond the next level. No pressure.
Sure. Well, I'll give people a resource. A year into this new book coming out and it all going so well, and I sold almost 200,000 copies in the first year, which honestly, I was so amazing. You can't believe how pleased I was with that. Pretty damn pleased. I wrote a long article called "How I Sold 180,000 Copies of My Book and Doubled the Size of My Business." It's published on a website called Growth Lab, which is run by Ramit Sethi, who's another New Yorker. You might even know him, Peter. And it's a long article, like 7,000 words, of all the marketing tools I used and things that worked and things that didn't work to try and get that book out into the world. So if you have a book or you're thinking of writing a book, first of all, I'd say is the time to start thinking about marketing is kind of as you write it, because you can start building in stuff that will amplify the marketing in the writing of it. And if you've got a book out there, then take a look at that article and there may be some tactics there that you might want to pick up.
Excellent. Well, I can't thank you enough. This has been fantastic. So much really good information. I love the transparency and the authenticity, and wish you all the best, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Peter, thanks. It's lovely to talk to you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.